fellow Rotarians, our guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's really good to be back with all of you because, as you know, not that I'm counting, but Prosecutor Tyack has about 1 year and 5 months to go. Gary, yeah, we haven't counted the days down yet, Pastor, but I can tell you that one of the reasons you don't see me here a lot is because, as you can imagine, and it's not just because of COVID, but a whole host of things, the office has been an extremely busy place to be at. And so for these last 2.5 years, my job as the man behind the curtain is to bring innovation to the office. And our speaker today is someone who understands that. He is a future leader. Wouldn't be surprised if you see him running for judge someday. He'd be excellent at that. But let me just kind of give you a quick recap. Last year, our office filed over 14,000 felony charges, over 14,000. In 2021, it was over 12,000 pending filed charges. As far as homicide cases, at the end of 2021, we were at 192. This year, we're northwards of 300. So, when you have those kind of volumes, and believe me, we've added prosecutors. We were blessed this past year to pick up a $1.6 million ARPA grant that came through the state of Ohio. And what that did was provide our prosecutors, and actually we extended it to the whole office, retention bonuses, because you can imagine, people can find jobs a whole lot less stressful than prosecuting aggravated murder cases, rapes, robberies, and so forth. Again, for me, it's been an exciting place to work because we've been able to, with the prosecutor's blessing, I said, Gary, we're not going to arrest and convict our way out of, the current crime wave. We got to be innovative. So he turned me loose. We did a task force of all of our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners in Franklin County. And as a result, thanks to those of you who live in Columbus, you voted the bond levy in last fall to fund a $35 million real-time crime center. And again, if we don't use technology, people sit in juries, right? They expect to have stuff just like on television, where they've got the perpetrator, caught on camera, which doesn't always happen, but it helps when you have cameras, when you have license plate readers, when you have ShotSpotter. All that stuff helps, whether you like it or not. Privacy, I think that went out the window after World War II. It really did. So, HIPAA, yeah, you got HIPAA, that's great. But privacy, Facebook, everybody knows this. Facebook uses facial recognition. Sorry, folks, it really is not an issue. But it does help us solve crime. The Crime Gun Intelligence Center is something that Gary also engaged me with. That's a federal initiative along with City of Columbus, also with our local PDs. That just kicked off out at 1970 West Broad Street, actually in space. When I ran the BMV, it's in space there, about 2,500 square feet. CGIC's been around for a couple years, but now that we've got, again, thanks to the ARPA dollars, we actually have NIBIN, a machine that can compare those gun shells, the expended shells. That helps track and arrest the shooters, gets them off the street quicker. It also helps us on the convicting side so that we get the real person, that we get the person that did it, not just the usual suspects. We want people that really did it, and technology helps us do that. So the whole game has changed. Technology is at a big forefront. Those body-worn cameras, can you imagine? We get images from, my God, over 3,000 police officers that, when there's a crime and a felony committed, we have to receive those images. So if there's 20 or 30 officers at a scene, like we had on the freeway shooting last month, imagine sorting through all those images that then have to be shared with defense counsel, have to be looked at and viewed. And you can't say, well, we'll just give you 7 of those 30 images. No, the court and counsel wants to see the images from all 30 body cameras. So think about how that has complicated the process of adjudication and litigation. And then you wonder why is it taking so long to indict people, right? Well, because not only do we have a lot of cases, but we want to do it right. And we bring in special counsel because when we work with CPD and other police agencies, it's much better to have someone other than our own prosecutors prosecuting a police officer charged with an offense. But that's not what you came to hear today. I just had to put that little bit of information out there. You came to hear a young man I've had the privilege of knowing and working with these last 2.5 years. Brendan Insco, your speaker, is an assistant prosecuting attorney with our office. He's previously served with the Baltimore, think about Baltimore, Maryland, high volume of crime place. He cut his teeth there. He also has been a prosecutor up in Delaware County, and he's now with us. He was also briefly with the auditor's office and led their units there, fraud investigation and so forth. He is a certified fraud investigator. So those are very unique skill sets you don't find in a lot of attorneys, which is why I'm bringing him here to you today, because I don't have that expertise. He does. And so he's going to share that with you. He earned his bachelor's in economics from University of Dayton. Ladies and gentlemen, I took Economics 101 and I dropped it. I dropped it. I mean, seriously, this 101 was a little hard for me to grasp. Elastic and inelastic demand, I said, the hell with it. And so he then got his Juris Doctor from American University, Washington College of Law. And he's going to talk to you today about fraud and some of the challenges, some of the preventive things that those of you can do, because it affects all of us. Sadly, because our police departments nationally and worldwide are dwindling in numbers, they pull those officers in charge of economic crimes, put them in with fighting drugs, fighting violent crime, and so forth. So as a consequence, if you were a criminal today, you got a wide open space if you know digital, if you know how to do phone spoofs. And I know Mike Schettinger shared a story up here earlier today about that. But Brendan's going to talk to us a little bit about it. We're also going to have some Q&A afterwards. So get ready with your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, your speaker, Brendan Insco.
All right, thanks much. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. I won't make that joke about raise your hand if you can't hear me. Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it. I know you have a heavy agenda today, so I'll try not to take too long. But I do want to raise 3 points. This, as you can probably tell from my CV, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I want to provide you with skills that will help you, okay? There'll be a couple of war stories, but this is not show and tell with Brendan Insco. This is me trying to give you tools to make sure that you never have to get to know me, rather, on a professional basis. So the first point that I want to make is the importance. Margaret, can we go to, there we go. All right, while we're getting that cleared up. Really just trying to get an attention grabber here that I want all of you to be aware that fraud, or as you might think of it, embezzlement, is a real problem. Most of my victims are so caught up in their daily lives, in their professional pursuits, that they fail rather to acknowledge that fraud is a risk. Second, it's very hard to recover stolen funds. So we work very hard at the prosecutor's office, and it's even enshrined in the state constitution that if you or your business is the victim of fraud, you have a right to restitution. That entitles you to a sheet of paper. Okay? If the money has been spent, how likely do you think it is that I'm going to be able to get it back for you? Folks, I will try. I will do everything in my power to get the money back for you, But I'm telling you, this is just from experience, the money is probably gone. Thieves do not invest their stolen funds, okay? That's not in a Roth IRA. I'm not going to be able to get that back for you. Lastly, always, 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 prevention beats prosecution. Now, real quick office overview. That's fine. All right. So the office mission, just real quick, I come from the criminal side, but just to make sure you're aware, the county prosecutor's office actually has two houses, serves two functions. The first is prosecuting crime, particularly felony, so more serious crimes. City attorney's office prosecutes cases on behalf of the city, and more specifically misdemeanors. Also, the prosecutor's office represents each of the county offices. I don't work in the civil half of the office, so I'm not going to talk about that, but just want you to be aware of it. So that leads to our organization. Prosecutor Tayak is the CEO of the office. Within the, I mentioned there were two houses, so we have a civil division, juvenile, that's juvenile crimes, and criminal, which is where I work. Within the criminal division, broadly speaking, there are specialized units. So we have the general trial staff, but then within that, we have special victim units. So if you think of, sadly, cases involving children or domestic violence, those cases will be prosecuted by the special victim unit. Or you may have heard on TV, there's SVU. Okay, that's what we have. Second is the drug unit. So smaller felony drug cases can be handled by the general trial division. But the big, like prosecuting cartels, we have a case involving, Mike, I believe, 75 co-defendants. Right. That's going to be handled by the drug unit. We have major crimes in gun. Those are really two separate, but the really big, complex violent crime cases. And lastly, the economic crime unit, and that's where I work and what we're going to talk about today. So if you or your business were to become the victim of fraud, you would start off by calling 911 or filing a criminal complaint. Law enforcement, don't worry about medic, hopefully we're talking about economic crime here, would investigate. There would be a prosecution packet put together, sent to this office. But let's hope here that we derail this, okay? Let's hope that doesn't get to that point, that we actually get the tools here today to talk about fraud prevention. Broadly, I'm going to talk about good tools and bad tools, okay? So we're going to talk about good tools that hopefully you and your businesses can incorporate so you're never actually the victim of fraud. You never have to make that call to the sheriff's office, to CPD, Hilliard PD, what have you. And again, you don't have to get to know me on a professional basis. And then we'll talk about bad tools, which is equally important because there are certain assumptions that we all make, that we all think, oh, this will work, this will help keep me out of trouble. And I'm sorry, folks, but some of those assumptions do not hold water. There are 2 points I want to make with this slide. So there are 2 columns you're looking at here. The first is comparing small businesses or medium-sized business to large, and the second is looking at the perpetrators. The first point I want to make with the small versus large business is simply that a large business, like I believe Margot's husband works at Nationwide, larger businesses simply have the ability to incorporate more controls than small and medium-sized businesses. It's not that they hire more ethical employees. It's not that they try harder necessarily. It's simply that in a larger business, like Nationwide, it's easier to build in levels of control that can put checks and balances in place. So if you're a Rotarian and you work with or you're CEO of a small to medium-sized business, I just need you to be aware of the fact that statistically, it's more likely that your company is going to become the victim of fraud or again, as I said, embezzlement. Do we all know what that phrase means? Stealing from your employer or your business. The second column, the real point of this column is simply to say that really anybody can be a thief. So don't necessarily look at your business and focus on payroll and think, well, only the payroll clerk is a risk, or only my accounts receivable clerk is a risk. If you look outside of owners from operations, accounting, upper management, and sales, those bottom four categories constitute 52% of theft across businesses. And by the way, Mike mentioned in my intro that I'm a certified fraud examiner. These statistics come from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So it comes from data from across the country, various industries. Again, first off, if you're a small to medium-sized business, I need you to listen especially closely to this presentation. And second, don't focus on any particular part of your business, because frankly, it can happen anywhere. Now, I mentioned good tools and bad tools. We've got a couple slides of good tools. First, segregation of duties. Broadly speaking, segregation of duties simply means do not allow one person to have sole control over an accounting function. In the good old days where we had lots of physical checks, most of you know you don't let one person receive the check, journalize it, deposit it, and we all just hope that in the end everything works out, right? Payroll. There's a case on my desk where the allegation is that a woman was given sole payroll responsibility and nobody was looking over her shoulder. So she stole about $15,000 simply by removing all deductions from her paycheck. So imagine getting your paycheck and there's the gross and the net. Well, what if they were equal to each other? Or if you're a sole proprietor, you just don't file a 1099, okay? There are no deductions at all. Well, the way she was able to get away with this is there was no segregation of duties. She had sole unilateral control over an accounting function. Don't allow that to happen. I talk about discounts. So in a case that I prosecuted, it was over a 2-year period, an employee managed to steal $1.1 million, spread over 3 victims, but it was really one victim accounted for 3/4 of that, so over $750,000 of theft. She was given the authority to offer discounts for quick payment. She was the account receivable clerk. Well, from an accounting perspective, a discount is similar to a write-off. It's just a smaller amount. She figured out that in the company's accounting software, while she had the authority to offer a 5% discount, she could also offer a 100% discount. And there was no check and balance on this. So in other words, there was no management permission required to offer those discounts. So do you see where I'm going with the segregation of duties? If you're going to offer discounts, that's good, that's fine, it's part of your business plan, but don't allow one person to have unilateral authority over that function. Second, reconciliation. I was at a table in a conference room with some defense attorneys a couple of months ago, and I was pointing out that some of my victims were not bothering to reconcile their financials. And the reply from the attorneys was, I think, reminiscent of what Mike Rankin mentioned earlier about his love for economics. The attorneys told me, well, we don't do that either. We're lawyers, we don't like numbers. That's why we hire other people. We hire people to do the things that we don't want to do. You can do that, but it carries a risk, okay? It's your business, you're the ones in charge. Remember, as intention grabber said, I want you all to be cognizant of the risk. If you're not cognizant of that risk, the likelihood of your business becoming a victim of fraud, does it go up or down, folks? Up, considerably. Restrict access to sensitive information. This could go, for instance, again, to payroll. If you allow one person to have access to account information, what can that person do? Well, they can steal from you. Social Security numbers, things of that sort. If there isn't a need for an employee to have access to information, don't give it to them. Who was it who said trust but, well, I think actually Reagan said trust but verify, but actually he was stealing that. It's actually a Russian saying, and the reason he used it was because he was trying to speak to Russians in terms of, hey, look, you already know this, so I'm trying to speak to you in your terms. I cannot begin to tell you the number of cases I've had now, going back years, where victims tell me, we trusted this person. They were like family. They were so helpful. They were so knowledgeable. It is not our job to trust our coworkers or employees, right? Something you get paid to do. Think about all the other people whose jobs could be lost because we trusted somebody when that simply wasn't our job. I had a case at Grove City where an employer trusted the payroll clerk. Payroll clerk had a gambling problem, unbeknownst to everyone at the business. Payroll clerk stole $338,000. The way this happened was there was a big contract, a very good contract that the employer won, and the vendor paid up front to cover the cost of the entire contract. Well, you know as well as I do that when you look at a bank statement, is a lot of that money already spent? It's already been committed? Well, she didn't know. Then she was a payroll clerk. She just saw this huge pot of money in the account and started giving herself raises, again to the tune of $338,000. Background checks. So I have a couple of points about this. First, always conduct background checks. I know that costs money. I'm aware of this, and I'll get to that. Frankly, this bullet point shows up on both the good points and the bad points. If done correctly, many of my defendants have prior convictions. None of us would knowingly hire somebody with a prior theft conviction, right? That being said, some people will do the Google background check. They'll enter Danny defendant's name into Google and hope that something comes up. Well, do you remember that $1.1 million theft case I talked about? That lady had 2 prior theft convictions. She had gone to federal prison for a year, but if you Googled her name, nothing came up. Okay, so there's a real good reason for that. If you have been in criminal law, you know that the clerk of court's office lists defendants' names, cases, things of that sort. But Google cannot search the clerk of court's website, okay? So if you Google somebody's name, a prospective employee to be specific, that's not going to tell you a whole lot. You're hoping that there was a press release. And yes, at Mike's insistence, we did a press release in this case. So in the future, buyer beware, this lady's going to get out of prison in about 7 years. So do conduct background checks. Second, some of you may be thinking about insurance. I have 2 quick points about insurance as it relates to background checks. Many insurance contracts require you to have done a background check as a condition to getting the payout for employee theft. If you did not do that, if you cannot document that you conducted a real background check, insurance is not going to cover it. At least let me say that in cases I've had, the policies did not cover it. Obviously, look at your specific policy, but do not assume that your insurance policy will cover employee theft. It may not. Second, the average number that I've heard is a $100,000 policy limit for employee theft. Well, in the case of the Grove City employer who had a $338,000 loss, that still left them in the hole by the tune of $238,000. She gambled away the money. Do you remember when I said at the very beginning of the presentation about the likelihood of me being able to get the money back? The lady is 65 years old. Guess what she did the same month she was put on probation? She retired. She's drawing Social Security. I am never going to be able to get that money back from my victim. They're wonderful people. I've been to their business. We've had multiple phone calls. I think the world of them, but I'm not going to be able to get that money back. All right? Periodic reviews against your business. Sit down on a monthly basis and take a look at your payroll. Take a look at your receivables. If the receivables, strike that. If the write-offs have gone up and up and up, it's time to at least ask a question. Is somebody tampering with their system? Is somebody pocketing the business's money? Lastly, again, trust but verify. I've had multiple phone calls, multiple cases rather recently, with phone calls or emails essentially saying, hi, I'm Victor Vendor. I changed my account number. Please, instead of using the old account number, use this new one. Look, when's the last time you sent that kind of information in an email or a robocall? Nobody does this. Having said that, if I'm a scammer and I'm sending phishing emails, if I send 100,000 emails and I get a 1% success rate, I'm wealthy, right? I've had a really good day. If you get that email or that call, or even one that would seem legitimate to you, please, 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 trust but verify, pick up the phone, call somebody you know, and just ask them, sir, I got this email, this phone call, is this legitimate? Should I be rerouting payment to a new account number? If the answer is yes, great, you're fine. If not, you're going to be filing for an insurance claim and contacting my office. And again, there's only so much we can do. I'd like to hone in real quick on vacation. Margot, I don't want to take up too much of your time here. This is a funny characteristic of fraudsters. They never take vacation, okay? Or if they do, it's quick. They want to be good employees. They never want you to know what they're doing. Again, trust but verify. They want you to trust and not verify. Force people to take some time off. Alternatively, rotate accounting tasks, okay? So if you're responsible for receiving checks next month, Jason Southwell, congratulations, you're in charge for a while, okay? That forces employees to look over each other's shoulders, makes it more difficult for people to cover up their theft. Bad tools. The first one's really something that you see more in government, rewards for whistleblowers. In other words, if you catch a theft or you're aware of a potential theft, $5,000 reward, that rarely works. Second, background checks. Remember how I said it would show up on both slides? This is the back end where all you do is basically do a Google search of the prospective employee's name. That only works if there was a press release or something else that would show up, for example, in a newspaper. It will not show up, information on a clerk of court's website, or you may have heard of PACER, which is the federal court version. None of that is going to show up on a Google search. So please do not rely on that. You're going to have to pay for a legitimate background search. Lastly, audits. I've had many a victim complaining to me about their accountant or a financial audit they had. And year after year, they're told that everything is fine. Maybe they're given an attaboy and told that they're doing a great job. Do we have any accountants here in the room? Well, in a good way. So I was going to ask that the accountants will tell you it is not their job to second-guess management decisions. They will definitely tell you that unless they're specifically hired to do so, they are not there to conduct forensic audits. So just set expectations reasonably about what that audit is showing or what your CPA is telling you. They almost undoubtedly are not telling you that you're not being victimized. Don't get mad at them. As a human, natural human emotion, you may get upset, but don't expect them or rely on that as an indication that you are not being victimized. Understand? That's all I got. Do we have time for questions, Margot, or do you want to? Yes. Sir?
Just a comment. So last February, March, my wife got a notice that she needs to file for a PIN to file for the 2021 taxes. So we did, and we filed, and the PIN wasn't accepted. We had to file a paper return for 21. It came back in March of this year. We get a notice from PPP that there's been, that you were late in your loan payment from the PPP project. And so we contact them, and the SBA won't tell us the amount of the loan, who it was paid for, or anything like that. We've got a loan number, and we get 3 phone calls a week saying to make your payment. We filed with the Dublin Police, we filed with the state of Ohio, and we give them every information, but I have no information to give them. That's kind of the backside of it. But there's been no debits or anything that I can see in our accounts.
Yeah, so what's your name, sir?
Dave Osborne.
All right, so Mr. Osbaum is talking about, and you may have heard of this PPP fraud, or there's also pandemic-related unemployment assistance. That's huge, huge, huge. I would love to tell you that this is an anomaly. It's not. Right now, I have a case on my desk where one young man was, he was working on processing pandemic unemployment claims. He worked for basically 2 months, okay? It was 2 months. He was fired on September 9th of 2020, and September 11th, 2020, he logged in again and found out that his credentials were never taken away. So we stole $6.8 million. And now he's living with his mom. So it's shocking the amount of fraud that was related. I understand that at the time the concern was to get as much money out as quickly as possible. You'll remember how much fun the pandemic was. But the controls were not existent.
Background checks. I was staffing companies, I do background checks. Franklin County will give you information about what other counties, or is it just Franklin? Like free, not free, but you can look up someone's record.
Yeah, wait, how do you, is it Whitetail?
Wow, that's pretty good, yeah.
So Mr. Whitetail was asking, in Franklin County, you can get free background checks. He was asking if other counties do. I hate to tell you, since I only work in Franklin County and my jurisdiction ends at the county boundaries, I just don't know. Sorry.
Thank you.
Ma'am, did you have a question? Sir?
So I watched a TV news program yesterday that delivered a person out of Milwaukee, I believe it was, that had had 42 SWAT calls on their house. So they were hit up continually. The police department didn't do anything about it, but they kept getting called in by some anonymous person on the website was calling and assaulting them. So they tried to find out who that person was or what website or how this came about. They couldn't get any assistance in doing that, so they filed a lawsuit to try to uncover what it was. The judge threw out the lawsuit, and they had to be paying the consequences of the legal charges or whatever was involved in that, and still have no recourse to it and are now losing their house due to all these additional expenses. How do you handle unknown, tracking down websites and an unknown false attack?
Yeah, so that's tough. Basically, I would just go back to, that really is the job of the police department or the, you can file multiple complaints. In Franklin County, the sheriff's office has jurisdiction over the entire county, so you can file there. Whatever city you're in has its own police department, you can file with that police department. You can file with the feds. I would just warn you that, if you remember at the very beginning, Mike Rankin was talking about pressure being put on law enforcement agencies, and we just need to be cognizant of the fact that law enforcement agencies are under a ton of pressure right now, coupled with diminishing law enforcement officers. So we're asking them to do more with less. That's nowhere as true as the federal government, okay? So we just talked about PPP fraud and PUA fraud. Part of the problem with that is just a lack of resources to go after fraudsters. So I would encourage you to file with the federal authorities. Just be realistic that you're probably going to have better luck at the local level They're just more responsive to us here in this room.
One more question?
Sir?
Why doesn't Google get into the Clerk of Court's website? Is there a reason for that?
So the question was basically, I think I mentioned 3 times that Google is a terrible source for background checks. And the question was, why is that? On a simple level, I don't know it because I'm a lawyer, I'm not on the tech side. What I will tell you procedurally is this. In order to actually search the Clerk of Court's website, or again, PACER, which is the federal analog, first you have to go through it's not a firewall, but you have to go to a home page and then click that you agree to the terms and conditions. That takes you to a separate page where you would have to enter the name of, I would say, Danny Defendant. Danny Defendant's one of my generic, obviously, names. There could be 5 Danny Defendants with different birth names, different middle initials. So I don't know, but just procedurally, if you've had to use the website, you could see intuitively how it'd be very difficult for Google to make heads or tails of all that information. It's basically an online version of a database, okay? If you think of an Access database that you all might use, that's essentially what the Clerk of Court's office is.
And Brendan, I think privacy issues and concerns, all of these databases be included. Just don't want to have Google having unlimited access to all that data, and then if you think we're going to get scammed, now, think of how it would be if people had total access to look up your dates of birth, current addresses and so forth, and unfortunately, it's not getting better. Sorry.
Thank you all for your wonderful service organization. I can't thank you enough for having me here today. And again, if you get an email or a robocall involving account information, please pick up the phone, okay? Thank you.